Chapter 7. Bangkoth Yukur, Solder Hater, Hide Portal Sea Training Exercises. Attention. This is your ship commander, came Sobash's voice. Just now, the training exercise has been declassified. Crew members should check the details through their wrist gears as soon as they're free to. Jint heard the announcement, ears pricked up, while lying in bed in his star pilot quarters. He activated his wrist gear. To summarize, continued Sabash, it's in the flow of things to follow up the navigational exercise with a battle exercise. I believe you've all catoned onto the face that half of our fellow ships aren't with us. The other 6 were headed to the Hyde portal from the opposite direction. Our first assignment was to see which half will reach the Count Dom of Hyde first. I regret to inform you we were beaten to the chase. Jint leapt out of bed. The details of the exercise were displayed on his wrist gear, but they were no longer a priority to read. Closing that file for now, he promptly initiated the procedure to ask permission to enter the bridge, then threw on his clothes as he waited for approval. In other words, our enemy has already made it to the countdown. As such, for the second phase of the exercise, we will be the ones attacking them. Do not be upset simply because we lost Stage 1. Stage 2 is where our mettle will be tested. We are scheduled to arrive at the Hyde portal in 12 hours. This will cap off this round of training. All hands, rest your bodies in preparation and treat it as though it's an actual battle. Before the broadcast was over, Jint was already headed for the bridge. He had yet to be granted permission. Around the time he arrived, permission came. Jint used the one-time-only temporary EM wave Crest key to open the door. "I'm sorry," said Sabash as soon as he saw Jint's face. "We don't know what's going on in the Hyde countdown yet. All we know is that the enemy is already there." "I see," he said. He could feel himself deflating. Let's look at it optimistically. If there was some kind of emergency, the exercise would get cancelled. And it's not, so Martinu must be safe. Sadly, this wasn't quite enough to assuage himself. What guarantee was there that swatting down a land world would even register as an emergency to the star pilots of the star forces? "I don't want to be presumptuous, but could I please be allowed to stay here on the bridge until the end of the exercise?" Presumptuous? Why would that be presumptuous? He smiled. "Are you saying you didn't board in order to view and study the exercise?" "We don't mind one bit, naturally." "Thank you very much, sir. I'll have a chair arranged for you. Why don't you go eat breakfast in the meantime? I'm sure you just got out of bed." 1 hour until they reached the Hyde portal. Ship commander called Rearguard Yatesh. An interbubble communication from the flagship. "Send a conveyance ship to conduct reconnaissance." "Reply with a Roger," said Sabash. "Vanguard Ekriua, I'm making you the conveyance ship's skipper. Prepare at once to depart." Ekriua stood up to salute and turned heel in a manner strictly in line with military etiquette. "Mr. Sabash," said Jint, who also lifted himself from his seat. "Do you mind if I go too?" Sabash knitted his brows, but soon he nodded. "I'll allow it, Lani Dryor." "You're the best," said Jint. He then told Ekriua, "I'm in your hands." "I'm just carrying out my mission," she stated. "I'm not doing anything for you." "I don't mind. I'd also like to come." "Can this ship's conveyance ship only seat 2?" asked Lafier. Ekriua nodded in reply. "Then I'm out of luck," said Lafier, before facing Jint. "You had best be careful and return in one piece." "Thank you. Do be careful," said Sabash. "And don't forget to pack motion sickness drugs." "What do you mean?" "It might not have been wise to give you permission after all," he said, assessing Jint's body. "Your skeletal frame is too brittle." Jint cast his eyes at Ekriua. She was as expressionless as always. Is her piloting style really that?" he asked Sabash. "It is," he said, looking concerned. "I should probably warn you not to go." "No, it's okay. I'm going," said Jint. Upon exiting the bridge, Ekriua muttered, "What was the ship commander so worried about?" "Beats me," answered Jint. Including the Flickabas, the blue team of Trampleblitz Squadron 1 sent out a total of 3 conveyance ships. "Hyde portal in E-5 minutes, murmured Ekriua. "We're set to split space-times 1 minute later." "Guess she's paying her passenger a little consideration," mused Jint. The space scenery was then projected on the surrounding walls. "Thank you," said Jint, believing it was another act of consideration for him. He had no Frokras to perceive the vicinity after all. It's not for you, said Ekrua. I just like this view. The inside of the space-time bubble was always gray. Their two fellow conveyance ships could be seen amidst the gray, with theirs, the Flickaba's conveyance ship, right in the middle. The vessels to the left and right were gradually flying apart from each other. Space-time splitting. The two ships got swallowed by the wall of gray at separate points and disappeared. The places where they got swallowed shone in rainbow colors. Ekrua looked with fascination at the rainbow shafts of light on either side. And she had every right to the circular rainbow that manifested when large amounts of space-time particles collided blew the rainbows over the surfaces of planets out of the water. As the bands of light spread, the colors progressively faded, until at last, they became indistinguishable with the gray. But that whole process was breathtaking. Hide portal in E-1. Accelerating. Hold up. Heeding Sobash's warning, Jint tried to check whether his seatbelt was securely fastened. No, the conveyance ship commenced acceleration. Jint's body dug into his seat. His delicate lander bones started creaking in short order. He tried to object, but his voice died in his throat. 30 seconds, 20 seconds, Ekrua's countdown was the height of serenity. It couldn't be clearer this level of acceleration was as nothing to her. On the contrary, she seemed to be enjoying it. 10, 9, 8. With each passing second, she started sounding more amped. Oh, she's enjoying this all right. Passing through. In that moment, she shouted with pure joy. Suddenly, Jint's body flew to the right. In a small corner of his mind, Jint recalled the modest battle he'd been a party to in the Feb-Barony. Leifir's piloting had been rather more delicate back then, compared to this rough-and-tumble ride. Thankfully, his seatbelt had been on right. Otherwise, Jint would have been bouncing around the steerer's room like a rubber ball. At the center of his blood-engorged field of vision was the bow of a giant warship. It was a raid ship, and it was rotating. Jint could tell it was Ekrua's strange trajectory. He might not have Frocross, but he could still feel the acceleration forces. In fact, Jint had always had a feeling his sense for levels of acceleration surpassed that of the Ov, who were mostly unaffected. Otherwise, why would she be going overboard on this gravity control system-less ship? The raid ship's prow drew closer. We're gonna collide, he tried to say, but his tongue was no longer cooperating. Then, as suddenly as it began, his punishment came to an end. This ship has exploded. This ship has exploded, repeated the machine voice, which was even more monotonous than Ekrua's voice. We got hit? Asked Jint. Yes. We failed the mission, she replied, utterly calmly. So unlucky. I dunno, you did get awfully close. I guess it is pretty unlucky that we happened to emerge from the portal near the enemy, though, he thought, as he stared at Ekrua. She seemed no different than usual. Was all that in my imagination? When the acceleration halted, he'd heard obscenities the meaning of which a guy like him, who'd learned Baranu in school, only vaguely understood. And even as he sat there in the steerer's room, he heard the lingering echoes of the bizarre song whose meaning he didn't understand at all, but through which he could tell she was enjoying herself. There was no way Ekrua could be the one singing that song, was there? Without exception, Ovs had perfect pitch. And it would be impossible for somebody with perfect pitch to stand such off-key noise escaping their own throat. So, what are you gonna do now? Stupidly, Jint hadn't considered the possibility they'd get shot down during the recon trek. Guess we return to the Flickob? We're killed in action, she declared solemnly. The dead can't return anywhere. Then what'll we do? Said Jint, out of sorts. He'd been planning to return to the Flickob as soon as he could after seeing the situation. We float here on standby. Just the two of us? Don't like that. No, it's not that, you know what I mean, yes. It'll be extremely boring. We really can't do anything besides wait here? What do you want to do? Said Ekrua, cocking her head. Jint verged dangerously close to saying, let me hear that song again, opting instead for, can we find out how the landworld's doing? Only a little. A little's fine. Come on, let's probe the planet. Ekrua gazed at him, as though in anticipation. What is it? Asked Jint, confused. Say, please. Huh. You're being bossy. That was when he realized his request had come across as a command. Please, he tacked on. Ekryua nodded without another word, unequipped the control gauntlet, and began working the controls. The main screen zoomed in on Martinu. Unfortunately, night obscured the hybrid functionality buildings of the city of Crandon. The look and feel of the land world hadn't changed from what he remembered. It was a globe of ferocious green, covered in specks of white. A communication piped in, calling the spirit world. Greetings to a wandering soul. Many landers believed the Av were cold rationalists due to their complete lack of religion. Others thought the Av class system was so held together by unrefined superstition that it may well be called a religion. And, as extreme views tended to be, both takes were false. While the Av didn't believe in life after death, they were familiar enough with the concept of the spiritual to mine it for humor. This is the wandering soul speaking, said Ekryua. What is your business? No business. Just want to tell you that you can dock. Or are you planning to cruise through inertial navigation until the exercise ends? Please reply quickly. The exercise is ramping towards the main stage, so if you want to dock, it's now or never. No need. The dead rest in the dead of space. As you like. Enjoy your dally with death. Over. The line dropped. Why did you turn it down? Asked Jint. Because I want to be alone with you, said Ekryua, looking him in the eyes. If I said that, would you be happy? I suppose, he said, not taking it at face value for a second. But why, actually? Because it's not fair. What do you mean? Our weight will hamper the ship's mobility. Our weight? Have we been putting on the pounds? Ekryua looked at him scoffingly. The conveyance ship, she grumbled. Oh. Just as she'd brought to his attention, the mass of the conveyance ship was non-negligible even for huge raid ships. Of course, the crew aboard the raid ships knew that too. Jint didn't quite buy that logic. By the way, said Jint, can we communicate with the land world? No, of course not. No? Ekryua nodded. We can only place a call during an emergency. It appeared they could only send a message after the exercise was lifted. In point of fact, it was probably loopy to expect to communicate with the land world using a conveyance ship. In any case, it wasn't exactly an atmosphere conducive to calmly resolving the challenge facing them. The image of a zoomed-in Martinu was still visible on the wall in front. Jint leaned forward. Could you enlarge the picture a little more? He asked, pointing at a place on the screen. Just make that bit bigger. Something was rising up from the blanket of green. It was very low orbit and looked as though it might stop at the tropopause. Could you enlarge it more? Ekryua did so without complaint, perhaps because of the urgency in Jint's voice. Due to the thin but extant atmosphere, the object was distorted as though viewed through a shimmering haze. Still, it was clearly a raid ship. What was it doing near a land world? Message that ship, shouted Jint. I already told you why I can't. This is an emergency. Why? Because it might be striking the surface. No, it's not. Based on what? It's leaving. It was as she said. The raid ship was about to break away from planetary orbit. Had it already launched anti-surface strikes? Let's get closer to the Landu, but he thought better of it. He yearned to see what had become of the surface, but so long as he was in the dark regarding whether the Forda Antobita were fully operational, it was just too dangerous. For a small vessel like a conveyance ship, it would be one hit and lights out. Second thoughts. Yeah, it's too risky, said Jint, though his anxiety hadn't gone anywhere. When's the exercise gonna end, if I may ask? Dunno. Hungry. Who, me? Oh, are you in for a meal break? Sounds good, actually, he replied. He wasn't that hungry, but some food would help turn his mood. 'Kay. Ekryua got up, and it wasn't long before she was back with combat rations. Jin thanked her, took his portion, and stuffed his cheeks. After all, eat was about the extent of what he could do at the moment. The only one that's yet to return is the Flickoba's conveyance ship, said Ados Raiwa. We sustained less damage than I was psyching myself up for. Of course, in an actual battle, we want that percent to be 0. Why did the damage, however small, have to be in the form of my subordinates? Did I pick the wrong people? Sabash felt slightly attacked, but naturally, he was overthinking it. Atos Raiwa was not the type to mince words. At any rate, the Flickob was now forced to fight without its navigator. That being said, the navigator didn't usually have much to do while in 3 space. Assisting a busy Deca Commander Idlia and the communications officer was the name of the game. And he had ordered her to serve as the conveyance ship's skipper. The blue team of Trample Blitz Squadron 1 had fused spacetimes right before passing through the portal and conducted the necessary information link. So far, they'd released several waves of conveyance ships to scout out the other side of the Hyde portal. According to the first recon trek, the 6 enemy ships were spread out, but no sooner did they receive the report than the ships began to gather, already assuming the formation to intercept them. It seems the enemies decided to intercept us in 3 space. Then should we plunge in without splitting spacetimes, said Vice Hecto Commander Durer, ship commander of the Batcob. No, let's split for the time being, said Ados Ryua, shaking her head. Hecto Commander Waryua isn't about to wait. In 3 space, a portal looked like a big phosphorescent orb. In planar space, it existed as a curve in the cosmic fabric. There was no connection between any given point on the sphere and a specific point on the curve. Practically speaking, that meant that one could have no inkling which specific point on the planar space side they'd emerge through when entering a portal from 3 space, and vice versa. Even if they entered the portal in an orderly line, the formation would inevitably be broken up on the other side. This wasn't much of an issue in times of peace, but it was a huge liability in a space battle. It could make for easy pickings for the enemy. However, this did not apply to groups of ships within single space-time bubbles. It was the bubbles that got scattered, not the ships inside them. A core that shared a bubble could maintain formation while passing through a portal. However, space-time bubbles had mass limits. It was impossible to encompass a large fleet in a single bubble, but 6 raid ships could be managed. The problem was that bubbles that were that close to capacity were sluggish things. In order to speed things up, they would need to split space-times and advance toward the vicinity of the portal before remerging. The reassembly point is here, said Ados Ryua, a blue blip lighting up on the window screen showing the map of planar space. It was a point right by the Hyde portal. After that, we just fight. No specific strategy, we fuse space-times, we run the info link right after, and I'll give you your alignments then. That is all. I'll see you at the rendezvous. All ships, split space-times. The 6 raid ships fused once again. Information link completed, reported the communications officer. That moment, something came flying from out of the portal. It could only be an enemy raid ship. Judging by its mass, it's a single ship bubble. What are they playing at? Ados Ryua placed a hand on her forehead. Oh, I get it. Wonder if they're planning to use the same tactic in actual war? Oh well, for now we need to deal with what's in front of us. Flickob, split away. Do we intercept? No need. Unless, that is, the enemy picks a fight with you. If that happens, we won't be able to swoop in to rescue, so please beat them. Roger that, said Sabash. He looked at the unoccupied navigator's seat, before turning his gaze to rearguard Yatesh, who was filling in for the role. The way Sabash had shifted his glance was smooth enough to obfuscate the fact that Ekryua's absence had temporarily slipped his mind. Split us off, if you would. And so the Flickob left its comrade's side. He understood both the enemy ship's intentions and the point of Ados Ryua's orders. A 7th raid ship would exceed the mass limit of the bubble they were in, spurring the physical laws of planar space to rupture the space-time bubble without mercy. The raid ships did each have their own space-time bubble generator engines, so it wouldn't spell their doom, but it would serve to throw off their formation if they transitioned through the portal individually like that. Which must be what the enemy was plotting. There was a number of measures they ought to take. The first was to split off and intercept. For example, they could split into groups of 3, that way, they could fight in an advantageous position even if the enemy ship were to merge with one of the bubbles. Yet, 3-ship bubbles were slower than single-ship bubbles. The enemy had stolen away the initiative as to whether or not to split spacetimes. Moreover, the enemy ship had only to predict whether they'd be in an inferior position if they fused with its potential target. There was nothing forcing it to do so. If the red team passed through the portal in the form of 3-ship bubbles, they could just wage battle here in 3 space and have the advantage. And if the blue team set about recombining, then the red team would poise themselves to follow suit. Ultimately, The blue team had two options: pass through in groups of 3 or surrender. Splitting into single ship bubbles was a recipe for defeat. They would gain speed, but whether they fled into the portal or had a scrape with red team ships was, again, in the enemy's hands. The red team was running the show now. There was one other option: forcing space-time fusion. With this method, no one knew what would happen after the bubble ruptured. How many lesser mass bubbles would it divide into? How many raid ships would be in which bubbles? They could only guess in terms of probabilities. The enemy wouldn't seize the initiative, but neither would the blue team. Control of the battlefield would fly off like a ball glancing off athletes' grasping hands. Taking into account various factors, having just one ship split off could just have been the best maneuver. If the enemy fused into 5 bubbles, they could easily pick off one such bubble's worth of enemy firepower. If they fused into a single bubble, they could fight on equal terms. Sabash had also surmised the reason his ship was chosen to break ranks: because the Flickob was down its conveyance ship, it was lighter than its fellows. This made it faster, which more than made up for the absence of the navigator. The Flickob split spacetimes from the blue team bubble. "Ship Commander Sabash," said Layfier, rising to her feet. "I'm not giving you the captain's seat, Fee," he joked. "No, not that," she pouted, taken aback. "I was going to suggest I stand in for Vanguard Ekriwa. Is that so?" "Well," Sabash shook his head. "If this weren't just a training exercise, I'd take all the hands I could get. But Your Highness isn't a participant in this exercise. You're an observer. If I let you pitch in, it wouldn't be as fair." "I understand, but this training exercise is extremely realistic, and in a real battle, there's a multitude of uncertainties at play. There is no fair in war." "That is one way to look at it," thought Sabash, very near to giving her the nod. But ultimately, he waved off the idea. "I'm afraid I won't allow it. I'd like to see how we fare without a core crew member." "I see. Then there's no helping it," she said, backing down. Sabash was relieved. To tell the truth, he couldn't imagine what having Layfier as a subordinate would be like, temporary or otherwise. He positioned the space-time bubble surrounding his ship behind the one surrounding the rest of the blue team. Then he eyed the movements of the enemy on the planar space map. They were veering his way, but the Flickob was right next to the larger blue bubble, so there was no telling which was their target. Either way, the Flickob would be drawn into combat maneuvers. After all, if the enemy fused with the blue bubble, Sabash was duty-bound to fuse and join the fray. "This is your ship commander speaking," announced Sabash. "There's a possibility the ship will enter a combat exercise. Unfortunately, it'll be single-ship combat. I know you've likely had enough of this, but give it 100%. Now then, all hands ready for battle." He seated himself back down in the ship commander's seat and switched to out-of-ship Frocross mode. "Check the safeties on all of the firearms," he ordered Deca Commander Idlia. "Check the safeties, sir." "Excellent." Sabash entered a passcode into the control console, informing the ship's CompuCrystal network of the imminent combat exercise. This allowed him to pull the trigger of the laser cannons despite the safety being active. The cannons wouldn't fire destructive death beams, but rather just concentrated light. When that light hit its mark, one or more of the receptors laid throughout the surface of the hull of the targeted ship would cry out and counted as a blow received. "Space-time fusion in 3 minutes," reported the communications officer. "Release the safety on the Irgiev Fina, Mach-EM cannon," he told Deca Commander Idlia. "Mach-EM cannon ready to fire," came the immediate reply. Mach-EM cannons were wonderful devices attached to the muzzles of real EM cannons and about 2 dag in length. They shot spy at Fina, Mach shells. These Mach shells were smaller than the nuclear fusion shells fired by EM cannons, but they ripped through space at the same speed. Again, they affected no harm whatsoever to the defending ship. It was all about what the receptors read. "Ignite the main engines." Main engines ignited. The Flickob was going through all the necessary steps for the combat to come. Space-time fusion in 1 minute. Now that the enemy had come this close, their quarry was clear: it was the Flickob. "Communications officer, turn 80 degrees to the left, then engage." While Ados Raiwa had told them intercepting the enemy was unnecessary, now that it was obvious the enemy was targeting them, that no longer applied. "Gunner, upon fusion, Fire without delay. All hands, prepare for EM cannon fusillades. Mock EM cannon recoil was beyond paltry. The crew wouldn't feel a thing, not even from a barrage of simultaneous fire. That was where the CompuCrystals came in. When they fired, the reverse thrusters and gravity control system were used to simulate the recoil of the real thing. E-10 seconds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 fusion. The range of Sobash's Frocross widened as soon as the flick-ob rocked from the recoil. Needless to say, the enemy was firing at them too. A head-to-head shootout. At this rate, we're not likely to get much out of this exercise, thought Sobash. Gunner, I won't give orders. Fire at will. All ships ready for combat, said the senior staff officer, Hecto Commander Semlake. Very good, said Ados Raiwa, giving Semlake a light nod before announcing to all ships under her command, attention. This is your commandant speaking. The field of battle's at our doorstep. It may not be playing host to a heated exchange of death lasers. It may be virtually flashlight-level beams and harmless pellets flying out of our cannons. But make no mistake, it is a battlefield. Those of you who are familiar with zones of war, remember that driving fire within. I'm sure it will be plenty heated enough for the young ones who haven't seen actual battle yet to appreciate. Heads in the game, everyone. Ados Raiwa pretended to be relaxed and comfy in her commandant's seat. In her heart, however, she was seething with a level of rage one wouldn't expect even toward the enemy on the real field of battle. Mostov's conceptualized war as a stripe of natural disaster, and Ados Raiwa was no exception. As such, she knew no hatred against the enemy. No, the cause of her ire was Hecto Commander Waryua's stratagem. It was a workable idea, there was no doubt about that. If it went according to plan, sacrificing a single ship could well have the fighting capabilities of the target. Unfortunately for Waryua, she'd managed to crawl out from under that fate, but unfortunately for her, that didn't put the red team at any particular disadvantage. What she wondered was whether he'd be willing to employ that tactic in the real world. In a scenario where both sides were of equal strength and the total mass of the core wasn't just under the capacity limit of a single space-time bubble, the strategy wouldn't hold. Plus, it was casting one ship as a nearly suicidal decoy. The OV tended to view combat as a form of play. The thrill of a battle with lives on the line mirrored that of a game with points or prestige in the balance. But it wasn't just one player's life at stake. One could toss their own life on the wager board, but with subordinates' lives to consider, contestants had to play prudently and with all seriousness. And mightn't this be showing Waryua to be lacking the proper discretion? Perhaps he couldn't tell the difference between a gambling match over everything one was worth and a game of chance played over a piece of candy with a child. Or perhaps he was simply taking this exercise as a light-hearted affair. Ever the social butterfly, Ados Raiwa had yet to feel the call of motherhood, but she did have an interest in the life forms known as children. She'd even, at times, initiated the kids of friends into the fun of betting. She'd go a little easy on them, naturally. But if she felt that the kids, who were supposed to be avidly learning from the opportunity, were instead using it as a chance to take it easy, she was the type to have to resist the urge to spank them. She didn't feel as though she was teaching Waryua the way of the game, but at the same time, she wasn't here to get schooled by him. There was still a raft of unknowns when it came to operating raid ships and trample blitz squadrons. This was the stage where they had to work hard to figure things out and rack up findings to spread to all the other star pilots. Even if post-meal dessert was all that was at stake, Ados Raiwa intended to treat this seriously, and she expected the same from her opponent. Hide portal in 30 seconds, said the real Biga Glagger, flagship navigator. Yes, in 30 seconds' time, all chance at a breather to go kick the punching bag would vanish. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, passing through. At once, her beyond ship Frocross expanded. It just so happened Hyde's sun was burning bright ahead of them. Where's the enemy? Ados Raiwa focused her fresh organ. Ship spotted. Azimuth, 54 to 121, distance, 0.12 light seconds, said the Drokia Glagger, flagship communications officer. Another ship at azimuth, 177 to 133, distance, 0.29 light seconds. Another at azimuth, 298 to 57, distance, 0.09 light seconds. Well, that's not good. Ados Raiwa bit her lip. She had, of course, considered the possibility Waryua had scattered the ships under his command this way, but he distributed them more skillfully than she'd imagined. She raised her command baton in the air. Then she closed her eyes to cut off her vision, perceiving only the space outside the ship through the input of her frosh. The sensation was akin to floating amidst the stars. She knew the gunners of each of the ships under her command, connected via information link, were experiencing the same brain illusion. And she knew that thanks to the information link, those gunners were receiving the movements of her baton. If she used it to point at a specific point in space, they'd understand what she was drawing their attention to. The closest of the three ships within range of her frocross was gaining distance, in the process of changing course. The farthest was coming their way, but was still out of firing range. Due to microgravity, EM cannon fire had theoretically infinite range, but it would be too easy to dodge at this distance. The third ship, meanwhile, came to face them after a slight course correction, and was now firing its mock EM cannons with abandon. Ados Raiwa thrust her command baton at it. All ships, attack. But as soon as the words came out of her mouth, they were hit with bad news. The Cancob reported down, ma'am. The Srumcob reported heavily damaged, EM cannons unable to fire. With just a single attack. Ados Raiwa clicked her tongue. Warships freshly emerging from a portal had a distinct weakness. Despite rushing through at all speed, their velocity in relation to the portal started off at 0 upon reaching the other side. For a small while after transitioning to 3 space, the ships were virtually stopped in place, lambs for the slaughter. Maybe this is because I haven't shaken my assault ship habits, reflected Ados Raiwa. A shot from a single assault ship anti-proton cannon wasn't that damaging, but a raid ship's EM cannon was lethal. It might have been a better idea to pass through the portal in single ship bubbles. If we'd done so, that would have spread out the damage. But she'd save the analysis for later. She had a situation to claw her way out of. The 2 ships they'd lost had begun attacking even before she issued the command. The brunt of 5 ships' worth of EM cannons concentrated on the enemy. Enemy ship reported down. Their next prey was the ship in the process of correcting course. The powerful, roaring propulsion engines kept pushing Ados Raiwa's ships to greater speeds. 3 ships charged at the flank of the new target. The enemy ship at the rear was also speeding up, but it wouldn't be able to close into firing range before they could finish its friend off. Pelted by mock shells, the ship exploded. This time around, the damage to the blue team was nil. At first, the enemy had gotten the drop on them, but after they'd regained their footing, it was now all about defeating each ship one by one. All ships, reverse course, said Ados Raiwa, pointing with her command baton. Their next target was the last of the initial 3 ships, which was still hot on their trail from behind. But it wasn't just 1 ship remaining. There had to be 2 more somewhere. Sure enough, one of those 2 appeared, hurtling their way. Now it was 3 on 2. The fact that the enemy was scattered apart gave Ados Raiwa's team the advantage. Despite the newcomer's arrival, she planned on chasing after the other enemy ship to the last. The 3 blue team vessels turned their bows and revved their engines to max thrust. Since this was in the direction opposite their inertia, they slowed down. Their target also stopped accelerating. Planning to buy time until the newcomer reaches firing range, I see, mused Ados Raiwa, the gears in her head spinning on overdrive. At this rate, forget about getting picked off one by one. We'll have a pincer attack on our hands. And the other remaining ship being around is ominous. Where's the other one? Ados Raiwa asked the Roykasariak, deputy staff officer. Widen your frocross range and search. Roger that. Oh well. We can't pick them off one by one, but there's always next time. She swung her command baton once again. Turned towards that direction, keeping thrusters at max. The blue team shifted direction away from the hide portal. The red team gave chase, while the 4 ships that had been deemed destroyed were left to drift near the portal. Ados Raiwa noticed something smaller than a raid ship was in a place far removed from the zone of the mock battle. The conveyance ship of the Flickob, most likely. By the time Ados Raiwa ordered another about-face, the opposing ships had already marshaled and dressed ranks. Now neither side had an advantage. The propulsion engines of the three blue team ships were still at full throttle, yet the battlefield pulled away from the Hyde portal at a snail's pace. Then, a raid ship began to emerge from the portal, leaving her taken aback. "Whose is it?" she asked. The answer didn't come instantaneously, since they were already more than a light second away from the portal. "It's the Flickob," reported the deputy staff officer. "Quick, the information link," she said, before realizing it was impossible at this distance. "Scratch that. Open the comms. Give me Ship Commander Sabash." Before long, Sobash's hologram was standing on the bridge. He didn't wait to be asked questions before speaking, in consideration of the time lag. "Our damage is minor. One of the laser cannons is down, but our navigation and EM cannons are totally unimpaired." "I'm glad," nodded Ados Raiwa. "Now you know what to do. Go kick Rayua in the back." 2 seconds later, and Sabash saluted. "Roger that. Please shoot without worrying about us." "We will." Sabash waited for the hologram to cut out before saying, "All ships, reverse course. Keep engines at full throttle. We're going for the pincer." "Now what will Rayua do?" Sabash folded his arms. "And where's he hiding that last raid ship? Surely at this stage of the game he can't go without it?" "There it is," reported the deputy officer. 327.55, distance, 7.11 light seconds. "Why so far away?" Atos Raiwa was dumbfounded. "Where is it going?" "It seems to be an inertial navigation." "It must have been destroyed, ma'am." "When did it get attacked?" "You know what, never mind. If it was that far away, it might as well have been in the next galaxy over for all the impact it would have on this mock battle." The enemy ships altered trajectory. By the looks of it, the red team had decided to aim for the weaker opponents first, and so they reversed course. "The enemy has reversed course. They're headed our way," said Yatesh. "That makes this 2-on-1, thought Lafier. Sobash's skill as a ship commander had exceeded her expectations. Upon entering battle, he entrusted the piloting of the ship entirely to the gunner, which was something anybody could do, but not just anybody could give detailed instructions and make an easier environment for gunners to do battle. If I were captaining, Lafier couldn't help but reflect, I wouldn't have been able to entrust all of the fighting to the gunner, which would have left me too distracted to get to other things. But now she knew better. She was absorbing a lot from Sobash's battle. If she were to be the one sitting in the ship commander's seat now, she was confident she'd do far better than she would have a day prior. Soon they'd enter the EM cannon's firing range. They were already primed and ready for combat. "We break past the enemy and rejoin the rest. Gunner, our allies will be firing in this direction without restraint, so I trust you'll do me the favor of making sure we don't go down by friendly fire." "That would be unsightly." "Roger that." "But that'll be difficult, sir," replied Idlia. "Just think of the battle as the real thing, and that will take the stress off," said Grinchia, intending to console. "What do you mean?" "I get more nervous during the real thing." "Really? But if you lose during an exercise, you get evaluated. If you lose during the real thing, you don't have to worry about evaluations. You just die," she explained. "I'm afraid I fear death more than an evaluation." Listening to this exchange, Sabash was smiling, though he didn't know why exactly, but he did have to interrupt. "A fascinating conversation, but get back to work, would you?" "Roger." Speed relative to the opposing units now at 0. Distance, 0.11 light seconds. Still too far to be shooting the EM cannons. Yet Sabash ordered the attack to commence. The strategy was seemingly a curtain of fire. At any rate, the distance between them was closing rapidly. Now the enemy began firing. Lafier pulled out her circlet's access cables and switched her Frocross to beyond ship mode. However, since she was merely an observer, the seat she'd been given didn't have a terminal for beyond ship Frocross. She felt very stupid. Distance, 0.05 light seconds. At this distance, she knew the attack should be intensifying. Yet to her irritation, without beyond ship Frocross, she couldn't tell for sure. She gauged Sobash's expression. He didn't seem particularly nervous. Until, suddenly, he winced. "Hold your fire and evade," he cried. But it was too late. This ship has exploded. This ship has exploded, announced the ruthless mechanical voice, informing the Flickoba's crew of their deaths. I'm sorry, Ship Commander, said Deca Commander Idlia. There's nothing to apologize for. You did admirably. And I expect you to do much the same in the combat to come, he said, consoling the gunner. Now then, we need to bring back our prodigal child. Open the comms for the conveyance ship. The line opened immediately. Vanguard Ekriwa, we have joined you in the ranks of the dead. Come back for docking. Roger, said Ekriwa. Can I say something? Came Jin's voice. Go ahead, she replied, and as soon as she did, Jin's face came on screen. Please contact Commandant Ados Raiwa as soon as possible, he asked Sabash. I can't do that, Lonnie Dryor, said Sabash, expression gloomy. This ship may not be participating anymore, but the exercise itself continues. When will it be over? I don't know. Though of course, given the current situation, I don't think it'll last too long now. I understand, said Jint, readily backing down. Please inform me as soon as the situation changes. Sure. I promise I will. But why do you want me to do so? Well, Jint was about to explain, but actually, I'll tell you later. I want some time to gather my thoughts. No problem. The line dropped. Lafier could bear it no longer. Ship Commander Sabash. Sabash sent a quizzical look. I'd like to know what's happening outside. If the exercise is over for this ship, then do you mind if I sit in the navigator's seat? Sabash smiled. By all means, Your Highness. Lafier took Ekriwa's seat. Still stewing from her earlier blunder, she inserted the functionality crystals at the tips of her access cables into the terminals on the armrests. The sensation of becoming one with the ship came over her with a wave of nostalgic contentment. 5 ships were currently engaged. A pair of ships moving forward, with 3 in the back, which were likely Ados Raiwa's team, the blue team. The exercise really will be ending shortly, she thought. Then she searched for Jint and Ekriwa's conveyance ship. She was finding these ordinary, everyday operations too fun for words. It had been too long.